Hello, and welcome back to The Curated Caregiver. And I am the adult caregivers coach, Donna Jackson, here with Misty Piekaar McWilliams. Misty, thank you for coming back. This is part 2 of our series, and the series is going to continue until we run out of this topic. So it might be 2 segments, it might be 3, 4, we'll see. But before we dive in today, we are going to circle back to a question we had from last segment. And that was dealing with the idea or the practice that some women, when they are going into labor, the physicians or the medical staff at their hospital or their facility, wherever they are, will ask them if they have a medical directive, which is a living will, or a will, or some sort of document indicating what's going to happen if things don't go well with the birthing process. So I went back to my nieces. I have 3 nieces. They are all 20s, 30s. In their 20s and 30s. And I asked them and their husbands, if you guys got asked this question when you all went into the hospital, was it your OBGYN? Did anybody at any point ask you this? And all 3 of them had a resounding no. I never got asked that question. So I was like, whoa, what in the world? And something we talked about is that it could be for any number of reasons that they were not asked this. What are your thoughts around that?
So first, thanks, Donna. I wanted to go back to this because I was shocked. And it could be because I have blinders on. I talk about caretaking and powers of attorney 24/7. So I think just by announcing it, it might be in my medical record. But on the flip side, I did wonder about, number one, is it a rural versus urban issue? So being in an urban area, is there a problem where the urban physicians are talking more about caretaking and the rural, physicians are not talking about it? And then, of course, I thought about systemic racism, right? And what's being said, for example, with certain majorities versus minorities. And I did have to question, is that an issue? And as we know, Donna, there are issues with urban caretaking versus rural caretaking, which are totally different and can be a totally different podcast. And so much an issue that there's federal grants for it. But then also the fact that historically people who are minorities have not been given as many opportunities and often are overlooked in the healthcare system. And so that's something that, I wonder about. Is it a potential? Maybe, but it is hard to prove. And that's one of the difficult things, right? So,
Yeah.
But it was eye-opening to me to see, stuff that I thought would be said to me would be said to other people, because you mentioned their ages and I fall within that category, the 30s something person. And so it does make me wonder. So
yeah. So many thank you, Misty. Yeah, it took me aback because I was like, wow, I've never heard of that before. And what you're highlighting for us here, and you mentioned on our last segment about preparing even in our 20s, right? So, and I know we'll talk more about that, but this is really highlighting the need around this. And although we're talking about caregiving for elderly on this podcast, and all of my programming and coaching is around that specific niche. Right now we're talking about the other end of it, birthing and youth. so I would be remiss not to just throw this in. This is bonus for you all guys out there listening, that, in the Black and minority communities, um, more women die in childbirth. More Black and brown women die in childbirth than any other segment of the population. Yeah, so I know that their research and studies are really just now beginning to find out what that's about. But another thing I wanted to mention here is, and I think I mentioned it before, it also could be just bedside manner. Because you and I both know that when we are in these advanced degreed programs, us as
Mhm.
lawyers and doctors, there's a lot of things that are not taught in these classes. You're not taught in medical school, you're not taught how to have a good bedside manner. Like that, your personality is much a part of how you're going to interact with your patients, right? And those are
Right.
caring for.
And Donna, you bring up a very valid point, which is you don't know what you don't know. So, I know a lot about caretaking and powers of attorney because I breathe it, live it all day. But this is something that people in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, their 90s should know, which is if you're in the United States, which I know that this is a global podcast, but if you are, most hospitals do have the advanced directive. So we're talking about the living will and the healthcare power of attorney forms listed on the healthcare website. Now, it may be very difficult to find, but if you just search for it, and again, if you're not planning to go, then, you're not going to be able to print this document out. But if you're having a scheduled surgery or if you are, let's say, giving childbirth, this is a document that would be beneficial for you to have, because for these documents, they're just documents. Really telling the people what you want is very beneficial. So, what do you want if something doesn't go right? Do you want to extend your life? Do you want palliative care? Do you want hospice care? So I think that's something, Donna, that everyone could use, is if you have a planned care visit to the hospital, search that hospital's website. And even some primary care physicians, like larger corporations, have this. So be your best advocate for your own caretaking.
Yeah,
So,
that's powerful right there. And more as we all go to doctors, just a simple doctor's visit with our elderly, sometimes it boggles my mind how much information is being thrown at us. And it's hard for us to keep track of, let alone an aging or ailing elderly person who might be going to the doctors by themselves. It's daunting. And so advocating and having somebody with them is huge. It's stressful. It's a lot of things for us. I can't imagine what it looks like for them. So yeah, absolutely, Misty. So, all right, mystery solved with that. Thank you so much. Um, and
I do have
what?
something else, Donna, that we talked about last time, which was, a lot of people will say, well, I heard at my church, or I heard at the group that I belong to, that it's beneficial to put multiple people in charge. And we talked about this last time, about having this notion of co-agents. So for those of you who don't know, what does co-agents even mean? So it literally means that you appoint someone and you put in the document that you want more than one person to serve. So I see this a lot of times with mothers who just can't bear to appoint one child over the other. She wants to treat them all equally. And, there's the financial power of attorney. That's the general or durable. They all mean the same. And if you don't know, then go back to the first part 1 to know more. But in that one, that they don't want one child to be left out. And we talked about the challenges here. So I recently just had one of these cases where a person walked into the office and they had done some documents a long time ago. and they had co-appointed both children. What happened? Well, 10 years passed, and now those children are not on talking terms. So imagine if you're that 80-year-old, okay, and things were going great in 2015, but now come 2024, you haven't updated those documents, and those individuals are no longer on talking terms. Think about the hassle it's going to create for you, for the medical community or the financial community, like at your bank, but also think about the stress that would occur if you had this happen to all of your other family members. It's just opening a very big can of worms, essentially, in which, siblings of the person that needs to be cared for, other children that weren't appointed, they're going to have to deal with all these family dynamics that if just one person was the point of contact, then it would be great. Now, let's talk about something else, Donna, where let's say you have multiple people. So you appoint child A and then a sibling of yours and then maybe a niece, right? So what does that mean? So what that means is that either the healthcare professional or the financial individual are going to go to the first person. And if that person can't serve, or if they're unwilling, they'll go to the next person. And the way to find this out is, number one, go read the document. What does the document say? So does the document say to remove this person, you need to send something through certified mail? And if so, has it been done? On the other hand, if the document does not say anything, then go to the statutes. And each state is very, very specific about what can and can't be done. I'm licensed in North Carolina, so you're looking for North Carolina General Statute 35, and then 32C for the financial. This would tell you what can and can't be done about removing someone, but typically it's a court process. So essentially you would, request the court to remove that person, but a well-drafted document will have, if this person can't, a little shameless plug, that's for the legal community. What's beneficial is going to the legal community and just having these what if the ages. So we've talked about the 20s, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. When I think about caretaking and caregiving, what's the first age that comes to your mind?
Retirement age.
Right. So 60s and 70s, right? I agree with you 100%. Everyone that comes says, I'm about to retire from my employer, and on my to-do list is this big, long list of responsibilities. The first thing is make sure my retirement accounts are up to date. And I think that's very important. So yes, the first thing you need to do is make sure your retirement things are up to date, but you also need to start evaluating, like, where are you at physically, mentally, and financially now in your 60s and 70s, and be realistic with yourself. So physically, what can you do? What can you not do? And what do you need assistance with? Financially, where's your money coming in? Where's your money going out? And are there holes and gaps? And then mentally, you can't talk about health without talking about the mental aspect of it. Where are you? And really looking at, what is your support network going to be? So what does it even look like? And I think it's important for you to look at your support network every 5 years, because it's going to change. For me personally, my support network is my husband and my mother, predominantly. And then my kids are dependent on me. But 10 years from now, it'll be totally different. So what specifically does a 60 or 70-year-old need to look at for caregiving? Well, number one, are you a caregiver or not? So I think you need to look below and see, is there someone that's dependent on you for decision making? And then looking above to see, is there someone dependent on you for decision making? So, for example, do you have small children or do you have older children who already have their own families? And what's required mentally and physically? And then look at it from the standpoint of, in addition to that, do you have living parents and what is required there? And something that really concerns me, Donna, is individuals who they also need to look at their spouses and be realistic with what needs there are with their spouse. I think that's hard sometimes to say, like, I might be the better, physically active individual, or it's even harder, I think, sometimes to know that you need the most care, right? And perhaps your spouse will be taking care of you 10 years from now. There's a term of art, Donna, and I'm not sure if a lot of people know about it, but it's called activities of daily living. And so what this term is called is ADLs, is what it's known in the communities. And it means what can be done. And there's 6 of them. I don't know them off the top of my head, but it's bathing, dressing, feeding, mobility, continence. And then there's this term of IADLs, so independent activities of daily living. And lots of times your physical health is looked at from that standpoint. How many ADLs can you do? And how many ADLs can you not do? And each state varies. But if you're already having issues with walking, so you're 65, if you just retired, and mobility is an issue, then you need to be aware of that. The other thing is maybe your parents are deceased. Maybe your children, you never had children. Maybe you've never been married. So you need to start looking at your siblings to see if they may either be a caregiver or if you need to be a caregiver to them. So really need to look at it from an up standpoint, a down standpoint, and then looking at it from their branches. So think of it as like a branch on a tree and in all the things you need to look at. So anything there, Donna, that I said that just you thought, well, I haven't thought about that.
Wow, so much there, Misty. Thank you. So much. So a couple of things, lots of people in society right now they find themselves in the sandwich generation where it's not one or the other, it's both. They are still raising children and now they're having to care for their parents. I know it's you. I know it's you. You didn't even mention your own situation. That's you. You said one or the other, but there's both, and so how do you navigate that? How do you, put the infrastructure, the support in place for on both ends, right? And you're still working. This is a lot. This is a very intense time of life. And not a lot of people are prepared for this. And so that's why we're doing this. This is our service, right? We're doing this to just somebody will hear this. And we know and we believe that somebody will get some answers to some things that they're struggling with right now. And we invite you to join the community of our Caregiving Connections community that you'll hear about in the links below this podcast. But go ahead, Misty.
Yeah, so you're right. You can't do this alone, and don't think you can. So one thing that you need to know, and this is true for everyone, is that all of our countries, people are getting older, and a lot of countries, there's not as many children, which means that we have many more people who will need caregiving than those that can take care of the individuals. So what can you do in your 60s and 70s to prepare? What things would if I was 65 or 70, what would I have, Donna? So the first thing is, I've mentioned this so many times, but I cannot address it again, is the financial power of attorney. I would get that document, and it would say like, I, Misty, appoint Donna to be in charge of my finances. And if Donna can't do it, then someone else. And what this ensures is that it assists me in being able to have someone who can pay my bills, who can, deal with Verizon. So I serve in this capacity for my grandmother. And what this really means is if she has a bad day or if she has an issue, then I come to play and assist her with that issue. Now, this document is called a license to steal because this is the document where a lot of people hear about how money has been misused and misappropriated. So one thing I will say is one safeguard for this is to take in, number one, make sure you trust, don't even have any doubt, not even a slither of doubt that the person that you appoint is going to do right by you, but also make it effective once you're deemed incompetent, because you could make this document effective the day you sign it, but push it back until it's only being used until you truly can't make those decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
Then the second thing I would have is the healthcare power of attorney. So what does this document do? This document appoints someone that's in charge of your healthcare when you can't make those decisions. It may be short-term, it might be temporary, or it may be long-term. A lot of people think about this document when they get, for example, dementia, and slowly but surely they need that day-to-day assistance, right? But it could be, and I did have this case where an individual took some medication. How many of us are, have a multitude of medicines that we have to take? And we know the older we get, typically the more we have to take for medications. Something reacts with one of the medications and you have just a temporary issue. Well, this document would permit your person to be in charge of your healthcare decisions. Think about it too from a mental health standpoint. So a lot of states, North Carolina is one, we recognize what's called basically a healthcare power of attorney for mental health. It's called advanced care or advanced healthcare for mental health. They're often referred to as PAD, Psychiatric Advanced Directive. But if you have a history of substance abuse or mental health, check into that document because that is very beneficial to address solely your mental health issues. So those are those documents. Let's talk about more. Donna, as you can tell, I have a lot of things that I can think about. The advanced directive, the living will. So this document talks about whether or not you need to take and you want to extend your life using artificial hydration and artificial nutrition. Some people do, some do not. And think about it this way. So you're 65, you just retired, and life is grand. You're playing a lot of golf. You're going to go see family and friends you haven't seen forever. Now fast forward, you're 85, you're retired, and you have a chronic illness. You're still retired, but whether or not you want to extend your life may change based upon your chronic illness. So this is something that you definitely need to look at as things come about in your life. So those are the documents, but let's talk about the financial stuff with caregiving too. So the first thing is, I'm pretty sure everyone's heard about long-term care insurance. And we know it worked out well. And then, everybody had to use it because there's long-term care. And all of the life insurance policies said, no, this is too expensive. We cannot keep doing this. So one thing I suggest for people in their 60s is to get what's called a life insurance with a long-term care rider. So what does that even mean? So what it means is it's a life insurance plan. It pays out upon your death. But if you ever need long-term care, then it would pay your long-term care. Much like a chronic illness plan. You've probably heard about those, like a cancer plan or another type of plan that maybe your employer had sold. Well, it's the same notion. It's the notion that this life insurance plan at your death would pay someone, your spouse, your family, your children. But if if necessary, and you need it to go into a nursing home or adult care home, then it would pay for your long-term care needs. And because it's a plan that's sold by each individual company, what they will cover and for how long is dependent. But I tell people it's very beneficial to get a plan that's going to cover for multiple months, because if you do need to be put into a nursing home or adult care home or some type of facility like that, it's typically not just a 1 month and you're out, right? It's a multiple plan thing. And the benefit is with this financial tool is, so let's say you do not need long-term care. Everything's great. And then at 95, you just unfortunately drop dead. Well, then that still gets paid out as a life insurance benefit to whomever you have appropriated. So talk about, the knowledge and the knowledge that a child might have. So Donna, in my situation, my mother has a life insurance plan with a long-term care rider. Think about, as I'm taking care of my small kids, coupled with the fact that my spouse, and I have a grandmother that I assist with because my father passed early. So that's yet another caretaking duty I have, right? Think about just the knowledge and the power of knowing, and the financial piece and just the mental piece you get knowing that mom is taken care of. So this is something that I really advocate for, because it's just one less thing on my to-do list.
Yeah. I like those.
So that's,
yeah, hold on, Misty. Hold on. This is like fire hose stuff coming out. This is so good. And yeah, the long-term care, everybody, it was upended. Everybody was like, what are we going to do now? So this is great. I didn't hear about this, the rider, but I like that. I have a question about that. So
yeah.
Before you need it as a life insurance policy, right? Every time you are taking from it, does that do anything to your premiums? Does that make your costs go up? Does it take from your ultimate life insurance pool? How does that work?
Yeah. So good question, Donna. So what we have found out from all the studies is typically if someone goes into a nursing home or adult care home, you're looking at right at 2 years. Okay. And know that for those of us who are in the US, Medicare, which is for people who are 65 and older, will typically only pay for nursing home care for up to 100 days. After that, it's self-pay. So a lot of people are surprised that Medicare will not pay for their stay. So what happens? You have to get on Medicaid. So I just want to put that out there for people to know that there's not this big pipeline that once you're 65, then everything's going to be paid for. It's called Medicaid, but you've got to basically go through your resources. And that's the Medicaid planning 101 thing. But going back to this, what do you do with this life insurance plan? So yes, to answer your question, Donna, each plan is differently, and you really need to look at what the plan details say. But for me personally, I know I have a few $100,000 because I went on that 2 years with the average rate of a facility costing about $7,000 to $8,000 per month, right? Which is super expensive. How much would I need? So I said several $100,000. The younger you get it, so wink, wink, nod, nod, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, really you 40, 50-year-olds, wink, wink, right? You lower your premium. The way my plan works, and typically works for most plans, is if you don't use that long-term care plan, let's say you get a $300,000 plan, you get the life insurance policy at your death goes to your beneficiaries, the people you appoint who are your beneficiaries, all $300,000. On the other hand, most plans will say you can use up to a certain value of that. So if it was $100,000, I know for my plan, I think it's 91%. So 91,000 could be used towards the long-term care aspect of it. So that nursing home treatment, whereas
Mhm.
the remainder would be paid out. And it depends upon when it's paid out. So the way the insurance company makes money off of that is the longer they can wait to pay out, the more they basically get paid back that money, and they make money off of that. So if, for example, you're 45, you get this plan, and then unbeknownst to anyone else, 2 years from now, all of a sudden you need nursing home care, that insurance company is going to lose their money off of that plan.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
why typically you can't get 100% of the long-term care dollars out of plan, because it's presumed that just by buying you a little bit of time until death, it would allow that insurance company to make their money back, essentially. So that's why they don't pay out 100% of long-term care or 100% to a death benefit. But it's typically 90, 91, 93%. And it's typically the younger you are, the better plan you will get. I know for me personally, it's just a few $100s, it's like $250 or something. But again, think about this. My husband knows if something was to happen to me in our 70s, I would be taken care of. I also, when we got married, said, you've got to do the same. So as far as us, he's mid-40s. I just turned my 40s this year. Like, long-term care is in the horizon, but it's not something we really think about because we have those plans. Plus, think about this. I don't know if I'm like everyone, advisor, and long-term care is not really a policy or discussion that we have to have because we have these plans. It's something that, yes, we could spend more than our policy allotment. Everybody can go through millions of dollars for long-term care, but it's something that we've planned for. So it's not really something that, like, we hear from our financial advisor every single year, like, what are you going to do? Well, this is our plan. This is what we're going to do. So it's nice for that not to be thrown in our face. And I think if you're in your 60s, especially early 60s, this is something you need to be thinking about. Now, if you're in your 80s, this is something typically you cannot qualify for, and it's very difficult because the thought process is that you're just going to pass away, right, pretty soon in time. I'm in age. So, Donna, something else that people need to be thinking about is their living structure, something that typically people don't think about in their 60s and 70s, which is, what does your house look like? What does your yard look like, right? What does your maintenance of your place look like? And I know there's a lot of people in their 50s who actually go to these senior communities. And I think there is a benefit to that because typically they're low maintenance. But this is something that if you're in your 50s and 60s, you need to think about. For me personally, I do a lot of yard work, not mine, but my family's. And that's part of caregiving. People don't realize that. But, if you grew up in a generation where the men were outdoors and the women were indoors, and you've got a lot of long livers who are all females, then guess what you do? You grass cut. So I can tell you, I'm pretty good at grass cutting, but it's something that 60 and 70-year-olds need to think about, right? Because you don't think about that. Or what's your proximity to the grocery store? Or can you Uber something? And I will say, I actually, one of the things I think the pandemic did that was really well and was a good service to those who are disabled, in addition to elderly and senior, is all of these Grubhub and groups that will come to your place and drop off groceries for you. If you're a caregiver and you have an aging parent and you're not taking advantage of that, you're not taking advantage of these delivery services, and you're not taking advantage of, medications being shipped by mail, then you need to, because it is one less thing on your plate. So,
Oh, wow. Well, we're definitely going to have another segment here because so much. You all, I hope you are really getting a lot of value from this. This is tremendous what Misty is um, educating us about, telling us about, just giving us information, giving us insights that we may not have had. So, in the last 5 or so minutes that we have, I want to kind of close the loop here. But Misty, yeah, definitely want to delve in a little bit deeper on our next segment on some of the things you talked about. But before we do that, can you talk to us about what you've seen around the psychology of all of this when people are coming in to get their documents done, especially people who they don't have anyone, Misty. They can't put a structure in place where they're looking up and then down. Who are they caring for? Who's caring for them? They have no one. I'm hearing this more and more, you know, um, even in the space where I occupy for my nonprofit services, where we want to dispatch people, volunteers to connect them through technology with anybody in the world. And we require that they have someone there. So it's not a one-on-one engagement. So that's a level of security I want to build in to the process. And a lot of the seniors are
Yeah.
saying, I don't have anyone. There are no neighbors, or they're closing in on themselves. They don't want anyone in their homes. And these might be people who they're not in the facilities where there's community around. So they literally don't have family, or they don't choose to engage with family for whatever reasons. Can you tell us what do you do? What are some of the solutions you provide for a person in that kind of situation, alone, and the psychology around it? How do you address it?
Sure. So there's actually a term that's used for that, not a term necessarily that I use or that I've coined, but it's called elder orphans, as in someone who's older who doesn't have anyone, right? There's no support network there. And so one of the things I tell people is in your 50s, start building those support networks. So start younger, right? So that you make sure that your 70s you do. Now, fast forward, let's say you do that, like in my grandmother's situation, but she's outlived all of her friends, right? So you've got to think about it both ways. Sometimes you'll build up some of the best support networks, but if you have longevity, in your genes, then, unfortunately, you don't really have that great of a support network. So what can you do? Number one, be aware there are corporate fiduciaries, people who will assist you. So these are people like attorneys like myself who will be more than willing to assist you with your financial affairs or your healthcare affairs. The benefit to that, and I do tell people this, and it's also probably why I am power of attorney for a lot of my family members is, especially if it's an attorney or a bank, they're probably not going to jeopardize their reputation or character and misappropriate your funds, right? Because it's their livelihood. The downside is typically when you have family members who do this, they do it out of a love or passion for you. They're compassionate towards you. However, as an attorney, I can do this and I will be passionate, but at the same time, I have my own caregiving responsibilities. I have to take and put, financial, I have to keep up with my own personal finances. So I probably won't have the ability to do it, right? Like someone like a person that if you found a family friend. Now, one group that I think is very beneficial that I never really thought about was nieces and nephews, right? A lot of people will use their nieces and nephews as individuals. Another group that I know, and this is something I've been doing a lot with Donna recently, is especially I've had a lot of Black clients who never have been married, never have had any family, but they're very heavily involved with their sororities. And this is a U.S. phenomenon, right? But as a result, they're looking at people within their sororities and fraternities, if they're a male, who would be potentially a lifelong friend of theirs. Now, in this situation, it's beneficial to have someone younger than you. And the reason is because if you're both 95, is it really beneficial for you both to go to the bank if you both need, a lot of assistance? So that's something that I kind of worked with groups about. And then there are healthcare professionals who do this the same way. And it's not to say that an attorney or a healthcare professional, those who serve in those corporate roles, won't do a good job. It's just that you have to understand they have other obligations, and they're not going to put their law license or their medical license on the hook. So they will do a fair job. But at the same time, knowing something about the individual, having that personal relationship with that person really helps. Donna, you mentioned the person who, doesn't, for their own reason, do not want to engage their family. So I do want people to know that there is a law, especially in North Carolina and in other states as well. It's called a duty to report. So what this means is that if you expect misappropriation of funds or neglect, and that could involve self-neglect. So that could involve an older person, for whatever reason, deciding that they're not going to take and do things, then you have to report. In North Carolina, it's called the duty to report. So a lot of physicians, when they see missed appointments on a continual basis, they will actually notify, in North Carolina, the county Department of Social Services. And it's not that the funds are being misappropriated or the stepchild or the grandson is using the funds. It's literally that this person who's 70 is just decided to, go inside, not interact with individuals, and the medical professional is concerned about the well-being and safety of that individual. So check to see if your state is a duty to report state. And most times you either have to report to a state agency or county agency. But this is so that they do a wellness check. So in North Carolina, what that really means is they send out a social worker and they say, hey, what's going on? What's happening? Are things okay? And we talked, Donna, about the people who live in the 55 and older communities. So they have community, but they may be isolated for whatever reason. So this is actually a good place where this could be used and should be used, is an individual who, and this happened to me recently, where they were in a 55 and older community, were thriving. Their husband passed away. And then all the neighbors notice, where's this person? So we'll call this person Jane, but where's Jane, right? And so you would basically say, hey, we just want to make sure this person is doing okay. What services, if any, can be provided? And sometimes mental health services and or grief counseling and or, maybe assistance with food assistance and or transportation services can be provided. So that's something to know. And that's something that I think every individual should do, even though it's hard to enforce this law, right? Like, how are we going to enforce whether or not people call in? But it's just the right thing to do. Imagine if this was your parent. Imagine if this was you. And for whatever reason, you decided not to interact with anybody. Wouldn't you want people to just call because they had the decency to care about you as a person?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. This touches on so much, Misty. This has been another amazing segment. We're going to probably wrap with that because, man, we're going to jump. We have some great jumping off points for our next segment. But we have put in these two that we've just done are chock full of great information. And everyone, we want you to kind of take your time, slow down the recording, pause it, jot these down, make record of these amazing suggestions, the advice that we're being given. Again, I only bring experts in front of you talking about this very niche space. caregiving of the elderly. So, Misty, thanks again. I have to jot all this stuff down because I want us to start off from some of the things, just like we did last time, from some of the things you mentioned in this segment to start our next one. But we'll wrap there, you guys. I'm sure that this was a lot for you all. It gets really heavy, and we want you to just breathe. Just breathe. This is a lot. And the fact that we're doing this is what Misty does, and her career, her service is supporting everything that we're talking about here. And so it takes a certain type of person to be able to kind of handle this and deal with this. And we know that. Misty and I know that firsthand. So we do want to recognize, take it slow, maybe not listen to all of it all at once, because it's a lot to process. And it's especially heavy if you feel unprepared. So, Misty, with that, we are going to wrap for this segment, and we'll be back. We'll bring Misty back. There's still so much more that we want to talk about as it relates to caregiving throughout the ages. So we talked about the obvious age where Misty sees most of her people coming in, retirement age, 60s, 70s. And we're going to stay there a little bit more, but we're also going to expand that out through all of the decades and give you guys insights and strategies on what you can do right now to plan and prepare. So, Misty, anything else that you'd like to close us out with today, or let the folks know what you're working on?
Sure. So two things. The first thing is, I know it's heavy and I know it's a difficult conversation, but if you take one thing away from each part, then that's one less thing that has to be done. So think of it that way, is that you do one to do from each time we speak, and that's one less thing for either you to do or someone else. And as far as working on something, there's this notion of guardianship. For those who don't know, it's basically when you don't have a power of attorney, someone's appointed, typically by a court, to handle things. And I'm working on what's called rethinking guardianship. It is in this state, we're actually one of the leaders in the nation for basically guardianship being a last resort. So now the clerks are essentially being given instruction and information on how to basically say, look, I know you're asking the court to get guardianship. Go get least restrictive alternatives, which could include a power of attorney if it's still possible. It's rethinking this term of guardianship, which can be costly, burdensome. So that's what I'm working on currently.
That's fantastic and much needed. Well, once again, thank you. You guys, thank my guest, Misty Piekaar McWilliams, elder attorney at law. And we'll see you next time.
Take care.